every single emotion we have is complicated. It's not simple. And emotions are high intensity, or we can have them on a scale where we can feel mildly irritated to rage. So emotions are also not clear-cut in terms of how strong it is that we are experiencing it. Nor can we really judge any one person's emotion or compare people's emotions. But what we do know is that every single emotion serves a purpose. So fear is basically built in to keep us safe. And then, of course, in terms of how we understand things, it can work against us as well. But by and large, it was built into our mechanism to keep us safe. Anger is built into our mechanism so that we are alerted to injustice and things going wrong, and then we can fix it. And so every emotion serves a particular purpose, but then we, not necessarily understanding the purpose of the emotion, it can become bigger than it needs to, and it can become sometimes, like in the case with fear and anger, can actually work against us. Right? So instead of just knowing, okay, something's not quite right here, and then doing something about it, anger becomes so full-fledged that we could potentially do something and hurt the other person, and then regret it, and then strain the relationship. And so emotions do serve a purpose, but we're not always aware of the purpose they serve, and so they can override and take over and be, for lack of a better word, messy. So today we're talking about grief. And grief serves the purpose, quite logically, to deal with loss. And all of us face loss in so many different ways. There's the most, the one that we're the most familiar with is somebody passes away, and there's that loss of that person in our life. But there's also loss of when a relationship fails, and we lose that connection, or we lose that sense of belonging, we lose feeling all the things we felt with that person. That can be an incredible loss as well. Sometimes a person through illness loses their sense of well-being. And then it might not seem as, devastating, but people lose maybe status or purpose as they get older. And even that loss can lead to an encounter grief. So grief serves the purpose of dealing with whenever we felt any kind of loss. So unlike other emotions, we're familiar with anger, and anger is this one kind of feeling. We're familiar with fear, and it's one kind of feeling. We're familiar with excitement, and it's one kind of feeling. But grief is not one feeling. Grief is a lot of feelings. And so, in modern psychology, they're broken it up into phases of guilt, grief. And so we will run through that because it does help to know all the different emotions that are a part of grief. But before we even go through all those emotions, there's no order in which these emotions happen. And it's not even like you finished one and then it's done. Grief is very cyclical. You feel a lot and you think you're done feeling, and then you're feeling it all again. And so often when people narrate stories about how they had grieved for their whatever loss it is that they had in their life, they will say, everything was going well, and then I found myself in the supermarket and I saw the cereal that she used to like to eat, and I just started weeping and weeping uncontrollably, and I couldn't do anything about it. Or I was driving along and the song hit on the radio was something that we used to listen to, and I had to pull over because I was crying so much, but I had been fine. I had been fine for months. And so this is a common story you hear with grief, that, when we have anger, it comes and it goes. Like, let's say you get angry with your wife, your son, your this, it comes and goes. There's a job interview, the fear comes, it goes. But grief doesn't quite go in the same way that other emotions have a wave and a life and most emotions we feel are event-based, person-based. Whereas grief kind of is a little bit, or I should say a lot more unstructured. And that's probably one of the most difficult things about grief, is that it's so incredibly unpredictable and unstructured. And even when we think we've dealt with it, it comes up again. So I'll go through some of the things that are involved in guilt. I keep saying guilt, sorry, grief. And guilt is one of them. So the first emotion in the introduction to grief is shock. We can't believe this has happened. And shock in itself is an interesting emotion because there's no feeling in shock. It's just this incredible sense of disorientation. So remember, this disorientation can come back at different stages in when we are grieving. But the disorientation is confusing and things not quite making sense. Disbelief that it's happened. Sometimes there's denial that it's happened. So even with death, even somebody's already passed away, people still think, no, it's not true. They haven't actually gone. So grief can have this incredible sense of denial because the shock is so intense that it hasn't been absorbed. So there's this disorientation, denial, there's this there's disbelief. So even if I know it's happened, I still don't believe it can happen. And like I said, this is very true for death because it's this incredible phenomenon. And we hear this so often when people pass away. People will say, I spoke to him just yesterday. Just last weekend, we were at lunch together. And the reason we say such things is because we feel if they were there yesterday, why aren't they here today? If I could do this with them, then why can't I do it with them now? And so it's the person getting the sense of it's this is what death is. It feels like, how can this be? Even though we know people die, because we all know that people die. The obituary section in the newspaper is full every single day. And so we all know that people die. But when somebody we know well dies, we can't understand how could they die. And this is really a strange thing about us. Sorry. And so that knowledge was very theoretical because we're not making sense of it. And so this we accept they die, and then we'll feel lots of things, and again the question will come up, but how? How can we have, how is it that they no longer with me? And so this stage, even though it's the first stage, because on hearing whatever it is, there's that shock, it comes back. The shock comes back in different ways later on. So the first stage is this disorientation, and then there is the memories. And memories can be beautiful. And we have experienced that when people pass away, sometimes they can be a sense of well-being, right? We remember them with fondness and a sense of like privilege of having to know them and a sense of gratitude. And then, of course, memories can have increased the sense of missing. And so a lot of grief is missing the person in our lives. The memories also mean we notice things that we remember things that maybe it wasn't such a good thing that I did or said. And so along with memories comes regret. And the regret can be specific incidences. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone for this. I didn't make the time. Regret can also be in the terms of trying to find ways so what happened didn't happen. And then sometimes the regret can be quite significant, so that it's grief, it's guilt. So regret and guilt are the same emotion, but guilt is a lot stronger, that I didn't do and now they're no longer there, so I can't do. Whether it be I didn't spend time or I didn't give something or I didn't apologize. So memories. And with memories, there's the missing and the regret and the guilt. But there's also, they can also be a lightness with remembering. Because, like I said, there's that sense of filled with, it was so beautiful. So, again, as you know, in grief, it's not a section. Sometimes you're feeling this way in the morning, and then you're feeling this way in the evening, and then you don't remember anything for 2 days. And then the next, the third day, you're remembering so much. Like just absolutely everything is reminding you of whatever it is you lost. So remember, it's not only death of a person, it can be death of a relationship. Right? And you keep remembering the relationship and the person in the relationship. And that person's still alive, but you just no longer have the relationship. And then so after the missing, there's anger. And that's why I said it's not sequential, because sometimes in grief we feel anger first. But 100% in grief, at some point, we feel anger. And so what is anger? Pujagurudev Swami Chinmaya defines it beautifully. Anger is when I don't get what I want. And so what I wanted was for it not to end. And then when it's something like death, right? So when I want something and I don't get it, and it's something really silly like chocolate cupcake, and I get angry about that, it's insignificant. But what I wanted was a person to live or the relationship to work, and I didn't get it, then I feel I have a right. This is important. Why didn't you give me this? This is really significant. And when we have questions in terms of when we're angry about loss, it's a very delicate, it's a very, very delicate thing to deal with. Because firstly, when a person is grieving, they're not interested in reason. They're asking the question, but they're actually not interested in logic and theory. And so foolishly, we try to explain to them, but they're not interested. Why are they asking the question? Because they want the person back. Or they want the relationship back. And we can't give them that. And so I know many people are going to ask me questions. And so just to keep in mind that anger does not have logic. Right? If you just take your mind away from grief now for a moment, and just think of when you've been angry with the helper. Okay? Something really not so significant in life. Is there logic in that moment of anger? Maybe even what she did was wrong. But while I'm angry, can anyone talk logic to me? Am I looking for logical reasoning at that point? Okay, great. Now come back to grief. I'm angry. Is there logic? No. There's no logic. I just don't want this pain. And so very often, spiritual teachers will say, this is not the time. Even though death is a great place to start thinking spiritually, it will depend on how receptive the person is to understanding. If anger in that moment of grief is a little bit less, the person's able to understand. If anger in that moment of grief is full blown, it's very reasoning won't work. And that's okay. So if you're grieving and if you are angry, be angry. Not only in grief, for anything. Anger can just become so huge. And when we're feeling it in grief, it also becomes so huge. It overshadows every other emotion. So one of the reasons this happens is because Our emotions are linked with hormones, and hormones are linked to different chemical changes in our body. And so physically, we feel that emotion. Not just mentally, we think this is something. The physiology of our body changes. And in anger, we see that. In fear, we see that. And in grief, we see that. The physiology of our body will change. When a person's in grief, they don't want to eat. Sometimes they don't sleep. Sometimes they just sleep. And it will depend person to person and at which point in their grief they at that moment experiencing. And so we don't know. We don't know where and how each day grief will manifest. The second reason anger is so big is because anger is our shield to sorrow. Underneath anger, there's always sorrow. So if I go back to Gurudev's definition of anger, anger is, I didn't get what I want, and so I'm angry with the person or the thing that didn't give me what I wanted. And once I stop focusing on the person or the thing that didn't give me what I wanted, I'm going to see that I don't have it. And when I don't have it, that's sadness. Whether it's the person I lost, the relationship I lost, the status I lost, the connection I lost, an ability that I lost, there's sadness. And so usually this is what people think grief is, sadness. And the reason people will usually think grief is sadness is because it's the longest. It's the one that's pervading. But grief is not one emotion. Grief is all these emotions in different variations and permutations and combinations. And the permutations and combinations of emotions come up again and again. Okay, so sadness. Sadness is just very heavy. And with sadness, there comes the sense of helplessness, especially with loss, where it's a death. Even when it's loss of a relationship, and this other person is just not willing, there's this incredible sense of helplessness. And we tend to want to live our lives feeling we're in control. And then there's this realization we're not. And so there's this feeling of being completely disempowered. So sadness is this feeling of the loss. And sadness is also helplessness, that I can't do anything to get back what I've lost, no matter how much I try. And so because I feel disempowered and I feel helpless, the next emotion is fear. I'm not in control. So what's going to happen when? I don't know. Recently, mean, actually, I've been dealing with grief from when I was a psychologist. At the age of 16, I used to work in crisis counseling. I was a psychologist before I joined the ashram. And in crisis counseling, people call, and it's usually they're in crisis mode, so there's a lot of distress, a lot of grief, a lot of trauma. So what am I now, 46? That's a lot of years of having exposure to grief and seeing it on a regular basis. So of course, as a psychologist, I saw grief on a regular basis. When you join the ashram, when people would meet me when I first moved to Hong Kong, they would be very curious, and the question they would ask is, so what do you do all day? And then I would smile thinking, how to explain to them what I do all day. And so because I haven't answered yet, they'd answer for me. Do you just pray all day? And in my head, I'm thinking, I wish. We see a lot of grief. And since COVID happened, the amount of grief that has filled people's life has been incredible. When India went through the second wave, when South Africa has gone through the riots. And so someone was asking me questions, and I said, well, it's not in our hands. What's not in our hands? Quite a lot is not in our hands. And so they looked at me with immense anger, as though I made up these rules, and said, so you mean anything can happen to anyone at any time? And that's fear. That's the feeling of what's going to happen next. Because something really horrible happens now, there's the fear. What's going to happen next? All of this is not so beautifully clear cut the way I said it to y'all now. All of this is just put into one nice little and called. What do we do with it? Nobody ever likes the answer. And there's only ever one answer. You feel it. Which bit? All of it. It's too much. Yes. There has to be another way. There isn't. Why? Why isn't it easy? Why isn't there another way? Because the greatest force in the entire universe is love. Love is why we are alive. Do you know the scriptures tell us that if a person didn't feel love, they would die. Not loved, love. If I am not loving, nobody's loving me, I die. Is this really surprising? You're trying to think, I've definitely felt not loved. Maybe. But you would have felt loved at the same time. Underneath the anger, underneath the confusion, underneath the fear, there's someone you love, and very possibly there's people who love you. And so you are alive. Love is the very foundation of life. Love is the very foundation of who we are. Love is the essence of what we are seeking. And what have we lost? Love. We loved this person. And either we lost them to death, or we lost them because the relationship failed, but we lost them. And love is who we are. And so to lose love will shake the very foundation of our being. That is why it's so painful. So what do? Number one, feel. Number two, love. Who, they're not there anymore. You can still love them. And if you look around, there's others you can love too. Not to replace, because we can never replace. And we never want to replace. But love doesn't have a limit. It's not that I can only love 5 people. After that, quota finish, over, done. And if you lost 2 of those 5 people, do that. No. You can love 5, 50, 500, 5,000, 5 million. You can love. Why would I want to love when I can lose it? You won't be able to help it. It's who we are. It's what we do. And it's what we want to do. So the more we resist loving because we're scared of losing, we'll stay in grief. Grief can last very, very, very long. But grief can. It can go. When people talk about grief, you hear so many different experiences. One of the experiences you'll hear is, they use the word cathartic, meaning when they allow themselves to completely grieve, something in their hearts open. And they feel free. They feel wiser and stronger. And the word they use is purified. Other people, when they talk about grief, they say, it's become my friend, because it reminds me constantly of what's important. Other people, when they talk about grief, say, it's become the ladders on which I have stepped to grow in faith. Some people lose faith when there's grief. Some people find faith when there's grief. Every journey is so incredibly different. Oops. But I want to mention one story before I pause and allow time for questions. Some people in the Hong Kong community know this person, even though they're not in Hong Kong. A young mom, wouldn't be more than 32, 33, might even be younger than that, had twin boys, and at age 4, one of them died. Three days after the boy died, her son, when people came to meet her, as you would have experienced, you don't know what to say. She spoke. And she said, I am so privileged that God gave me 4 years with him. I'm not meant to have any more, but I'm so grateful for those 4 years. And I know, while she's saying this, she's crying. I know he is taken care of. When I met her, it was quite a few months after that. And all I said to her is, I'm so incredibly proud of you, even though I have no right to be because it's got nothing to do with me. But I have never seen anyone so incredibly graceful. She said, what is faith for then? Not everyone will have that experience, and she is truly an exceptional being. But I tell you the story for you to know. It's possible. It's exceptional, but possible. And if it's possible for her, maybe when I'm grieving, I won't want to hear that. And if you are, you can feel whatever you're feeling. But the last stage of grief is acceptance. This young man reached that stage very quickly. Sometimes people take their entire lifetime. We can pray. We take sooner rather than later. Okay. So, just to sum it up, grief is many emotions. Grief never completely leaves, but it can get a lot better. Once the anger part of grief dies, we can find answers to a lot of our questions. And there can be silver linings. It can actually enrich our lives in many different ways. in time. I pause here. I'll let the in-person people ask questions first.
Question. I'm struggling with karma.
Karma.
And the question can go in many ways, but tied in. How does
Karma
bad
fit
things-
into death.
Why does bad stuff happen to people?
Why does bad stuff happen to good people is the question. Actually, I rehearsed saying this, but I forgot to say it at the beginning of my class. I wasn't going to say karma. What I had rehearsed saying to y'all is, we live in two very different worlds. In my world, death is not a bad thing, and we don't run away from it. In your world, death is horrendous, and you do everything in your power to avoid it. In my world, death is inevitable, and we prepare for it. In your world, when you hear someone say prepare for death, you think they're morbid, pessimistic, and insensitive. Or maybe whatever else you think. So, please know we are speaking two different languages. When you ask the question, why does bad things happen to good people? In my world, death is not bad. Why is death not bad in my world? Because only one who can give life can take life. And he takes what is his. It's got nothing to do with me. He gives, he takes. We are all his. So going back to him is not a bad thing. In fact, it could be a way better thing than hanging out here with you guys. Sorry. Just being cheeky. Second, I've said this a few times over the last few days. God doesn't decide when we die. We decide when we die. The soul takes a birth, chooses where, when, to whom, based on geography, social standing, economics, language, culture, religion. Soul chooses. When the soul books the ticket to come here, it books return ticket to go back. Death is return ticket. So your question is, why do bad things happen to good people? So firstly, definition of bad and good. Now let's talk about good people. Please tell me who's bad people.
There's a whole list.
Do you have a list of them? ask their kids if they are bad people. Ask their parents if they are bad people. And then on their list, you might be there. Are you bad people? In their list, you bad people. On your list, they bad people. Are you bad people? Are they bad people? Please show me these bad people. I will show you mirror. Are you going to tell me some people are better than others? I agree. Some are better than others. What determines if they're better than others? Well, the law of karma says actions have consequences and thoughts are actions. Have you any idea what another person is thinking? Maybe for a certain period of time. All the time? Now, when we say negative consequences come to negative actions, let me give you a very simple example. Let's say I am incredibly stressed. And so my thoughts are racing. This could happen, that could happen. I need to get this done. I need to get that done. If I don't get this done, this will be rush, rush, rush. Here. Somebody's trying to say hello to me. No, not now. I'm too busy. And then I get ulcer. Why I got ulcer? Stressed. Am I a bad person? Why did I get ulcer? My thoughts created disease. Did I want to get ulcer? Was that on my to-do list? Did I know I was creating it? Ignorance of how powerful our thoughts are make us create lots of things without us realizing what we're doing. Karma is not punishment for horrible things you've done. Karma is not punishment. Karma is consequences. So often we don't know the ripple effect of our thoughts. We don't know the ripple effect of our actions. Karma is not judging you to be bad or good. And some people will say, God did this. God's punishing us. Firstly, He's not. If we are to use the language of devotion, then God's not punishing us, God's teaching us. And the analogy that will be given is sometimes we put our kids through challenging things so that they can learn. We want them to get stronger. We want them to get wiser. We want them to become better people. So, but it's not God that's doing. Because the analogy that's given to us is God is like the petrol in the car. The petrol doesn't decide where the car goes. The petrol doesn't decide how fast or slow the car goes. The petrol doesn't even decide what kind of car it is. All the petrol does is give the energy for the car to go. We ask this question, why does bad things happen to good people? We must remember that there's so much judgment in that. We have judged what is good, we have judged what is bad, and our judgments are not necessarily correct. So I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. If somebody is asking because they're angry, be angry. If you're asking to understand, I can explain. Everything in our life is to teach us and show us that we are divine. Sometimes people will say, but like this? You're teaching me like this? Do we know better than God? If we knew better than God, we already know we're divine, right? And we wouldn't be grieving. Because love is infinite and never dies. We only grieve because we think it does. And if he's trying to teach us it doesn't die, is that such a horrible thing? He's trying to teach us it doesn't die. He's trying to teach us we don't die. He's trying to teach us we are divine. So I've said he in the language of devotion. But please know, he isn't doing anything. We. The soul decides. Why? So that we can go back to knowing we divine. Up to us how long we take to learn that lesson. If God was a puppeteer sitting up in heaven, would we worship him? Is that the kind of God we'd worship? He's unconditionally loving to everyone. In the same way, he doesn't judge good and bad. We judge good and bad. Yes?
When we go through something very tragic, we always why me.
Yes, we do say why me. Actually, it's very much a part of grief. In grief, when there's the shock aspect of grief, why me? The disorientation part of grief, why me? The anger part of grief is why me? Who hasn't grieved? Show me one person that hasn't grieved. Yes, there's different levels of grief. It's based on how much we love. It's not based on age. It's based on how much we love. The more intensely we loved the person, the more we will grieve, regardless of the relationship. You know, when Lady Princess Diana died. Gosh, people grieved so much they didn't even know her. Why? Because she became this dream. And so their dream died. Sorry, we choose.
So we choose the intensity of grief.
Everyone will feel the depth of grief if they allow themselves to feel it. We choose whether we feel it or not. That we don't choose at soul level. That we choose now, here. Some people avoid, distract, cover up. They won't feel it. But if I love, and if I lose what I love, it's going to be grief. And you really can't compare one person's grief to another. You really, really, really can't compare. And also, it's not a competition. Please, guys, it's not a competition. Pain is pain. So why me? Every single person is asking. Everyone. Everyone grieves. Like I said, it's not just death. It's even a relationship failing, a dream failing. Everyone. That's why we can understand when somebody else grieves. That's why when we watch a movie and something horrible happens, all of us are like, even if you're too cool to actually cry in a movie, you still feel it. Of course, if you are like me, you have to have wept. And it's a movie. Why? How can we relate to that? Because all of us feel grief. The event will be different for each person, but everyone feels grief. For some, it's a miscarriage. For some, it's a horrendous divorce. For some, it never happened only, the relationship. For some, it's death. And it doesn't matter who. If I loved intensely, it's grief. Okay. In person? Anyone else? There's lots on the chat. No? I'll just see all the comments on the chat. Grief doesn't end. We can find joy again. We can find peace. But we never stop loving the ones we love. When we feel guilt, there's two things we can do. Please make it very ceremonious. light a candle, sit at the altar. Make sure it's in a quiet time where you're not going to get disturbed. And write a letter to this person. Dead or alive, doesn't matter. You will not be sending this letter, but you can write this letter and apologize with all your heart. Express whatever it is you want to express to them in that letter. And then at the altar, offer it to the Lord and ask the Lord to give this message to that person. And burn the letter at the altar. Please make sure it's safe. And also, please do it ceremoniously so that you get closure. Make sure it's sanctified. Right? And make sure you're completely feeling what you want to express so that it reaches them and you can lighten your heart. Once you've apologized to them, you can also apologize to the Lord for your shortfall. As your child, I failed. As we so often do, please give me the strength to not fail you again. Please make me aware, more aware. Please make me more sensitive. Please make me wiser so that I can live a life to make you proud. When we pray to the Lord in this way, when we apologize to the Lord in this way, it really does purify us. Because only the Lord can purify us. Only that which is completely pure can purify. And I know in anger, some people have said, in grief, I don't believe in God. That's fine. In grief, you can be angry and you cannot believe in God. But when you calm down, I want you to think about, does He need you to believe in Him? Is He like some politician collecting votes? But we need, because where else will we go to get strength and purity and clarity? I repeat, in grief, it's fine. Every emotion you feel in grief, it's fine. It's something to think about on a calmer day. How should we be around other people who are grieving? Sensitive to what they want. If they want to be left alone, leave them alone. Please, leave them alone. If they want to talk, let them talk. You don't tell your story. Let them talk. If there's something in particular they want to do, you do. But I find the best thing to do when somebody is grieving is I ask them, how do you want me to support you? Will you let me know when you want me? Will you let me know when you don't want to see me? I don't know if I can. Okay, I'll check in. Yep, I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. Okay, good. Because they feel different every day. So We won't know. Day to day will be different. Should we talk about our grief? Not too much. By all means, talk. But with emotions, they can become a little bit stuck. So do talk. I'm not saying don't talk. But do other things also. Go exercise. Go clean. Cleaning is amazing therapy for grief. Maybe some artistic outlet, painting, dancing, writing. Then again, if you want to talk, talk. And yeah, if you don't want to talk to anybody, that's also fine. So does the soul sometimes choose to pass in an accident? Yes, the soul can choose. All sorts of ways in which to die. 2 weeks ago, I was with a family in South Africa where 2 young girls had lost their father who was shot in front of them. Why would a soul choose that? I don't know. There's possibilities of answers, but each one's a guess. But this much I know. Our journey is to know we are divine. We can get lost in the details. And the details are not divine. Yes, souls choose tragic ways in which to die. Tsunamis, earthquakes, riots, war. So many have died in war. You know, the thing is, each one of us live in a bubble. If you come live with me, tragedy happens every week. What helps us through? Understanding. And this wonderful thing called surrender. Because anyways, I'm not in control. So you guide me, my Lord. Guide me back to you. And guide me to do your work. That's everyone's questions answered, I think. If you're not feeling faith, what should you do? Just feel. Feel whatever you feel. Asatoma Satgamaya. May every soul be led from untruth to truth. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. May every soul be led from darkness to light. Mrityarma Amritam Gamaya. May every soul find deathlessness. Why does death happen? So that we know we are not these bodies that die. Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityarma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Hari Om.